Hey guys, Mark from Gunpla Network here, and I'm back with my second part of G-Rescue. So we're working on the GM BeamMaster, and I'm going to give you a look around some of the parts and ideas that I'm looking at right now. So, as you can see, I've got stuff spread all out in front of me on the workbench. I've never done a tutorial like this before, or a series where I've filmed from the perspective of you seeing what I'm actually doing. I'll try and improve along the way with actual showing you and trying to keep my fat fingers out of the way and show you as much of what I'm doing as I can. But obviously, if I was showing you every step of the way in great details, like every bolt, every screw detail, anything like that, we could be looking at 40 plus hours of everything that I'm doing. So we'll try and keep it to a minimum. I'd like to keep each video to under 20 minutes if I can. Some might be longer, and that's fine if you want to skip through if you see one thing and I'm repeating the action. This is just so remember kind of like taking a kit that, I didn't want to display this on my shelf because I hated the color to start with. There were too many stickers. I felt it was lacking in a great amount of detail, and some of the original GM3 parts were better than others. So I've also got some parts from other kits, like a GM Type-C shield that you can see there. And for this one, I think I'll fill in these two holes with screw detail, maybe some scribing, because the front of the shield's pretty bland. The inside of the shield, though, is really highly detailed, so I'll probably just panel wash that. That's the clamp from the BeamMaster runner, but I didn't like the BeamMaster shield. It was 2 gramps, sort of style for me. These missile pods, though, pretty good. I'm happy to use those. This is a knife that I had from a P Bandai kit that I reviewed last year, and this is the standard GM3 BeamMaster, or GM3 assault rifle, whatever you want to call it. And that's actually a foot component from a kit that I had laying around, a foot cover and ankle cover of something else. I think that was P Bandai, because P Bandai, you're always going to have leftover parts from original kits. So that actually sits in pretty good there on the rifle, that I can use as a mount on the legs, and it doesn't fall out. And I didn't modify that at all, it just fits, so you'd be quite surprised. I might be able to use that peg on this glued on to hold it onto that hole in the leg. So yeah, because remember the plan is to have a long rifle, so I need somewhere I can store the standard beam rifle. Now, if we have a look over here, I have to replace the BeamMaster side skirts with the original side skirts because I want to be able to use the medium range, they're the long range missile pods. I'm going to keep those on the hips like they were on the original GM3, but those covers from the BeamMaster are for the I can't remember what you call them, energy packs. So the standard GM3 skirt I am going to reuse. I might add some scribing on the back plate. I think I'm going to add some IC socket vernier details there on the rear. Now, the GM3 front skirts are pretty bare, and as is the front crotch cover. So what I want to do is take the GM Type-C crotch cover, which is about the same size, slightly more detail on it, and use that. I'll have to modify the crotch cover, as you can see, because that's got a peg and a hole in the opposite locations to where it's needed. So I'll probably chop a peg, drill a hole for that one, and that'd be fine. Now I'll probably scribe or add pla plate detail on the front skirt though. The backpack, I'm not going to use that antenna. I think it's dorky and doesn't look very good. I'm going to obviously fix in the seam line. And I'm going to go with the Mark II style original GM3 vernier and beam saber mounts above. But I will add a mesh detail of my own. So that's just painful to get out. Yeah, that's just what we're going to do there. So I'll keep that though, because don't throw anything away. It can always be reused. All right, so I'll probably add some IC socket vernier detail again to those once they're all painted up and everything, the thrusters. I might add a MS panel detail onto the backpack just to give it because there's a couple of flat open areas there. If I use a small panel, I can either make a hatch or a vent for more surface detail. These bits click together and go in there, and then I have a place to store the beam sabers, because on this kit the actual original design is meant to house them in the knees, which is why the huge knee covers are there. But obviously, being a HG and a remake or a recolor and slight difference, they weren't going to go to that length of detail, so I didn't have anywhere to store them. Also, here on what I'm showing you here with a pen, it's a bit thick, but with some modification I should be able to make a fuel tank from this texture or pen marker. And yeah, so you just need to find the right size of something, and I'll be able to make probably a pen to make a fuel tank, a short fuel tank, not the giant ones you see sticking off the unicorn. So here on the arms, it's not much of a seam there, and there is a bit of a one on the back. I want to be able to fill those in and paint it, and paint the frame joint parts in between a separate color as well, without a ton of masking. So that's only a very slight modification on this kit. It's just gluing it closed with the poly cap in the correct position. As the forearm covers, probably just need some scribing detail on those. Use the prying tool, carefully open up. Okay, so there you go. You can see all it is a poly cap inside there, and another poly cap for the ball joint wrist down below. So all we got to do is make sure that we get that in the right spot, close it up, and then just check if we can actually, insert the arm joint and get it back out again. Now this makes painting so much more simple. There you go. So feel free, we can seam line seal that up on the back. Just make sure when you're doing this, guys, you also get the arm joints in the right way, because sometimes they can look different. Now what I want to do here is I do want to seam line the head, so we'll crack that open. Now this is a slightly different head. Like most heads will go together in two sections, and the faceplate slides up. If you glue it closed, you have to slide it from below, but the faceplate is all part of the head in the front there. So you take the visor off, the white visor at the front, and the eye visor is part of that. I'll be painting that silver inside before putting some Aurora film on it, and then the visor over the top to give it a more lit, GM eye effect. But let's have a look at this. I also want to add an antenna. So if we close this up, also what I want to do, guys, was remove the extra camera that they have on top there from this cover. I want a more smooth flowing look. Now this white piece, the chin piece, just happens to slide in there very luckily once again on this kit. So many easy mods. And I can slide that back in after painting. So what I'm going to do is measure out the antenna, which is just a piece of pla pole that I showed you in the first video. And I can cut and glue that in. The shoulders, I'm going to fix up the seam line, even though you may not see it unless we eject the shoulder missile boxes. But I'll do it anyway, just because it's the way I want to do it. And add a shoulder vent. Now, there is a vent on the shoulder there, but I have these Kotobukiya, I think they were, wave option parts. Shoulder vents. Well, not shoulder vents, but vents. And they just happen to be the right size that I can glue those over the top of the existing vent and create more of an outer detail. So rather than an inner detail. So we can say that pla plating is an external or an outer detail. Scribing is an inner detail, scribing into the kit. to create a line. Now the shoulders, if you crack them open, just need to make sure that you've got that poly cap in there, because that's recessed in, and if that's in the right place, the shoulder mounts, the missile mounts can go in there. So first up, what we're going to do, cut this camera off from the head. Just take your scissors. Now be very careful when doing this, because you could slip and cut yourself, but also that you don't pinch too hard and, you know, stress mark the plastic. So those are a spare pair of nippers. I'm then going to carefully use the knife to scrape off the excess plastic. Okay. And then just take a sanding stick or a file. If you're going to use a file though, be very cautious, because you can actually, you know, go too far and create an indent that we don't want. So I'm just using that to get that as smooth as I can, because there was a big build-up of plastic molded on top here. I'll take my medium to fine grade file. Now I need to crack this back open again, because I need to put some glue in. And that's my Wave hobby tool part separator. Really handy. I'm going to take some extra thin, Tamiya extra thin cement. And there's two types of extra thin. I can't recall which one's which, because I've got the dark and the light green jars on my desk, and one of them is like a 15-minute dry and the other is like a, I don't know, a few hours dry. But regardless, this is the thin cement, so highly recommended when doing seam lines. This is the one. You just make sure you get it on every surface there. If you have poly caps that move, you need to be super cautious that you don't get it into those, because that then glues them into place and your poly cap won't be moving very far. What I like to do is mostly close it up and then run the brush through one more time with another coating of the stuff to make sure we're getting it all the way onto the surface, and then squeeze it together until you see it popping back out or oozing back out of the line. Don't worry if this doesn't work for you, because sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't for me. I then use putty if I have to, which I'll show you later. If it's a square flat surface, you'll be able to use a vice grip or some clips to hold these closed. But because this is a bit of a weird shape, a round headed shape, we can't really do that. So I'll just line it with some more glue to make sure. And then I'm going to leave that to dry for a little while. When you're working, try and keep all your parts grouped. We're just going to do the same with the shoulders. Get your glue. Be careful, there is a moving poly cap there in the center. You do not want the glue running into that. The reason I am seam lining these also is because there is a seam line down the middle of the vent, which is where I'll be gluing a vent over. Now on these ones I can use, these are like a stationary clip. They come in a range of sizes. Mostly it's the smaller ones. Just put some more glue up there. And then the bigger ones I use for like obviously MG size and stuff. Like there. Now if you don't get these right the first time, they can mark the plastic when they spring off. Hit you in the face if you're not careful. So just be cautious. Okay, put those aside. Now the backpack actually needs the same seam line treatment, so I'll take the thrusters off, pry that open, make sure we get a good amount of glue in there, and we'll leave that closed with the biggest clip I have because that's a weird shaped one as well. Now the MS panel details, as you can see here, you get 2A runners, it's the same thing. I think I paid about $10 and I've had it for 2 years. So between the wave option parts and the Bandai option part one, flat panels, you want the Bandai ones, good range on there. The actual like vents are probably the Kotobukiya one. Sorry, the wave, I know I keep saying Kotobukiya, they make parts too. So what I'm doing is just measuring up where I want to place it on the top of the pack there, panel detail. Take my clippers, get that off. Just clean up the edges. And then grab it with your tweezers, whoops. Okay. Hopefully you can see it there. So this is a panel detail, like a hatch. Maybe we'll call it a maintenance hatch on the backpack. Line it with some extra thin again. And then position it on using the tweezers to keep your hands away. Because if you get glue on your fingers or it leaks onto the kit and then you touch it, you gotta be really careful. It'll make lines in the flat surface of your fingerprints. And then you're stuck sanding that back and it's just more work. So I use tweezers for that. Now, instead of using the molded on, I could paint it a different color, plastic crappy mesh hosing that comes out of this stuff. Real grades have mesh hosing. This just has a molded plastic piece. I actually have some mesh hosing that I got from the Scale Modelers supply, but I mean, you can find them in different hobby shops and stuff or online. It's just a really thin, I think maybe a millimeter mesh hose. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut off, once I've seam lined these and fixed up the nub marks. And I'll be using a mesh there. Onto the forearms though, because like I said, they've got a seam line on the back. Sorry, a bit of a boring video, I know guys, it's all about seam lines so far. Once you've glued those, remember not to glue the poly cap in place, just the panel arm part that you want. We're going to leave all this to dry for a little while and then we'll come back to it. Okay, sometime later, we've now come back and we need to do some sanding on the parts. Now we have 600, 800 and 1200 grit. These sheets can be purchased from your local hardware store or online for anywhere from 30 cents to $1 per sheet, depending on, I think my local sells them for about 80 cents Australian per sheet. So I buy 2 sheets at a time and it's really cheap. You can use a piece for a while, like months of sanding kits. So I then also have these nail sanding blocks I think I've talked about before in the tool video. It's got 4 sides. That probably ranges from like 1200 to 2000 grit. I also have a medium to fine, once again, a manicure stick that I found in a local supermarket. It was a couple of dollars. It's been serving me well for a couple of years now. So, work that out, a few cents per year. What we're going to do is I'm sanding back the glue now that's external to the seam and smoothing that out. You don't need to push too hard, and this part will just take a little while, so move through the different grits that you have. When you're happy that you've got, the roughest grit will obviously take the most off. You're then using the 800, the 1200 and be careful on these round surfaces. You don't want to flatten them out, you just want to take off the glue. Alright, but now, as I said, it doesn't always work for me. Like, sometimes I find that the seam doesn't fill in well with the extra thin cement, no matter how much I put on. So I also use the Tamiya Basic Putty. Now, this is good for filling in holes, it's good for filling in seams, crevices, dints that you've made on your kit with a knife if you've hit it while you were doing cleaning a nub mark or something. All I'm going to do is, especially on the backpack, those there were some big marks on there. I think my knife blade was blunt when I was cleaning the seams up. Just take a toothpick or a flat piece of pla plate, something that you've got around that you can apply it with. Don't get it on your hands if you can help it, it's really hard to get off. And then just go around to all the places that you want to fill in. Now, I don't know what the actual dry time of this is, I just leave it for a little while, so As you can see there, I'll do the same on the head, the backpack, and a few other places. Just use the toothpick to get it into the places that you want. Try not to spread it too far or too much around because this is a pain to clean off. Okay, now sometime later you can see that the putty is dried. I think I left this about a day. My panel's on. All glues, all putties have dried now, so I'm just into cleanup mode. Now, what I find is a really coarse sanding stick is good for this on flat surfaces. You could probably go maybe, is it 300, 400 grit sandpaper if you were using that, and you can wrap it around paddle pop sticks and make your own, but this is definitely something like a 200, 300 grit. It's really coarse. You need something coarse like a file or a really coarse stick to get this stuff off when you've put it on, because once it sets rock hard. But it does fill in the seams really well. So just keep sanding your way around there and you'll see it takes it off quite nicely. And really all you should be left with on the surface is, you know, the little lines with a grey line in it or something, or a white line depending on which one you get, showing where the putty is set in. Okay, all the cleanup is now done and we're going to talk about the head modification. So what I did here, take your pin vise and the appropriate size drill bit once you've measured out the piece of pla pole. I've cut that down and what I want is, yeah, about this long, because I'm going to drill it and push it down into the head, so remember to leave yourself enough. This is from Evergreen Scale Models, polystyrene, pla plate, pla pole, whatever you guys want to call it. This is a random rod pack. It comes with different size of hollow and filled rods. Really handy. Okay, so what you want to do is measure up where you want the stick. So this is my antenna for the head, remember? Kind of like the powered GM or the GM Custom or the GP01. So 0083 series style. I'm going to add a, so I'll take my knife tip and just carefully push in and twirl it around a little. And what we're doing here is just making, when you're doing pin vices, you can slip easily on the surface when you haven't got the, the kind of right angle or whatever, and this is on a rounded surface. So just give yourself a little indent, a starting point for the drill bit. Now, this tool here is a digital caliper. I got this off eBay for like $6 or $5 Australian, I think, delivered from China, and this has been really handy. It's handy for measuring pla pole, plate, thicknesses and stuff, but also when you're using scribing, I was struggling to get parallel lines and even lines. This helped me to measure that out on flat surfaces, curved surfaces. Yeah, so you zero it on and then you just slide it along and it gives you it in millimeters. So the pla pole is, it's really hard to see, sorry guys, 1.4, 1.5. Now I've got a range of drill bits here. Okay, and that's 1.5. That's negligible because we're going to glue it anyway, so the glue will fill in the rest of the hole. It's usually better to start smaller, but that's 0.1. It's nothing. It's and like I said, the glue's going to fill the hole anyway. You can also just measure it out like this if you like. If you don't have a caliper or tool like that available to you. So I've made my indent. I'm going to grab my drill piece. And we're just carefully gonna, start pressing on. Careful, because you can slide so easy on a rounded surface. And think about the angle you want to drill this in at too. So I don't want this thing sticking straight up out of the head if I... So what I did was I actually switched down to a smaller drill bit, and sometimes it is better to do a pilot hole and then come back with the bigger drill bit and round the hole out to the size that you actually need it. So you'd need like a 1mm or 1.2. Okay, so what we're going to do now is, if you've test fitted your antenna, and that's kind of just too big, we'll just sand around the bottom of that. There's some rough edges on it from cutting it. Okay, so that does sit in. So what we're going to do now, and obviously remember, cement glue will melt the cement, so this will melt it all up. So I'll just put a drop of it. This is the thicker cement glue. Now I do want to fill the hole, so put a drop there. Push the antenna in, and there we go. Now I can always trim this down later if it doesn't go in as much as I want, but you know, I have taken off a massive antenna for long range communication off the backpack, so I do want one, you know, for some ranged communication away from the ships. This is primarily for me a space mobile suit. Now, while we got the pin vise out, let's address the Vulcans. They do have a little hole drilled out in them, but what I want to do is actually drill them out a little bit further. So I'm going to take a really small, and this, like I said, this was a cheap pin vise I got off of eBay. You can get like God Hand, Tamiya, there's a range of pin vices from hobby shops, so remember to check those out. I do have double ups, I have 1s and 2s and 1.5s, I have heaps of it, but what I'm doing now is just looking for a small one, and that's a 0.6. That's a 0.4. I think we might start with that one. We'll test fit it. Wind it into the pin vise. And when you're using drill bits this thin, you need to be really careful because they can, you know, get you in the hand. They can stab you. You can go through the plastic, you can bend them, they can break, and then you'll be stuck with a piece inside the kit. So yeah guys, just be careful. And we don't want to drill too far in, I just want to give the illusion of the Vulcans being hollowed out, and I'll probably shove some silver paint inside those later. So now the shoulders are all dried up and ready to go. You can see I've done my putty on top there and filled in those little squares we had. I'm going to glue the vents onto the vents on the outside that were already in place. It'll probably be easier if you use, I have this little desk device I got off Wish, I think here, but you can get them from hobby shops as well. I just obviously sometimes order stuff online because it is easier than going into a hobby store. But most hobby shops would carry, if you have decent ones, will carry tools and stuff like this, so remember to check those out. And this is just a little vise to hold stuff into, and it comes with a couple of different things, so you can, you know, hold them in different ways and angles and different sizes. But let's just put some thick glue over the top there. I'm going to grab the vent with my tweezers. Remember I said because you don't want to get glue on your hands and touch the kit, you'll just leave fingerprints. Oops, careful with that. Oop. Yeah, this is the hard part. If you don't get a good grip on things and touch it with glue, the glue will then stick to it. But there we go. And there you go. So what I've done is I've just glued the wave option part vent over the top of the existing vent, and it fits perfectly. See, and that gives it more of a raised detail effect rather than just having the inward one. Do the same for the second, and voila. Alright guys, thanks very much for joining me for this video. Hopefully I haven't been talking too long and you've made it to the end. So part 2's done, part 3 is well underway, and we'll be bringing that to you shortly. Alright, thanks for tuning in to Gunpla Network. I'm Mark, and I'll catch you next time. Bye bye.